So this morning I was presenting on the progress for HyNet. We were in a session called Industrial Decarbonisation. And that is what HyNet is there to do, to take our valuable foundation industries and find ways for them to decarbonise. I think it's really important. We are in a new world. We are trying to work out how we transition, and therefore different organisations, different clusters, different parts of the industry will be moving forward in different ways, and we need to learn best practice from each other in order to find out what works well, what maybe doesn't work so well, and how, therefore, to make that transition as smooth as possible. So some of the sessions I've been in today, I was there for the plenary, which was very useful to gain a really good background as to where things are. And also then the innovation session that we had just after lunch was very good to hear from the Department of Energy and Net Zero and hearing what their views are on how we bring forward new technologies and experience from other new technology players as they're taking their technologies and their projects through to commercialisation. One of the most important key messages, I would say, is to echo what Chris Skidmore put in his Net Zero review, is that we need to recognise this is definitely and fundamentally about the environment and about doing the right thing for the planet, but actually that is well correlated with doing the right thing economically. So globally, we are moving to net zero. Those companies, those projects, those countries who make progress on how they are going to transition to net zero will gain an economic advantage over those that don't, and therefore it is in their economic interest as well as the interest of the planet. So I think there is a really interesting question as to how we manage the transition from where we are today to where we're going to be in the future. So if I give you an example, the UK is leading the way in offshore wind, and yet if you look at the proportion of our total energy that we are using, currently it's about 2 to 3% of our total energy is from offshore wind. That will grow to 10% over this decade, which is fantastic. There's still 90% that needs to be dealt with. We rely on the fossil industry to do that, but it is unacceptable to keep emitting CO2 from that. So the fossil industry has a role in understanding how it can manage that transition to decarbonise through that process. So things like carbon capture and storage will be key, and they have the experiences, the capability and the drive to enable us through that transition. So how do our major intensive energy industries make that transition is really important. So something like the cement sector contribute around 7 or 8% of our global emissions. We need to find a way in which we can help them to do that. So for them, that's about capturing the CO2 that comes to their process. Other major industrials that have high temperature heat, for example, for them, often a low carbon hydrogen makes sense as they transition from a natural gas fuel to a low carbon fuel, and that tackles the issue they're looking to address. Conferences like this are really important because they bring the industry together to enable them to share best practice, but they also allow us to engage with policymakers and others to ensure that the policy frameworks match what industry can achieve, and industry knows that they can rely on those policies in order to enable them to do what they need to do.